after escaping an active threat. A mansion in the middle of nowhere. Going through these empty rooms and hallways, filled with widows and unusual living beings. Behind these slow opening doors, where fear is built on limitations, with the road to Requiem ahead of us, you are now entering the foundation of survival horror. So it's been a while since I uploaded a new video on this channel, and to put it short, it's because I finally got myself a new job outside of YouTube. I don't need to say more. If you've been following my channel for a while, you will know that I'm a huge fan of the horror gaming genre, especially survival horror. And of course, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for this franchise that changed my love for video games forever.
Resident Evil.
So Resident Evil, directed by the legendary Shinji Mikami, was a project that no one ever expected to become a huge success. Yet it went far, and I mean far, beyond those expectations. Resident Evil was the game that put the survival horror genre on the mainstream radar. But before we get into the retrospection, let me share with you some facts about the development of this game that you probably didn't know about. Resident Evil was originally intended to be a remake of one of Capcom's earlier projects, Sweet Home, a 1989 RPG based on a classic Japanese film of the same name. The game follows a film crew making their way through a mysterious mansion, and if you are familiar with Resident Evil, you will instantly recognize some of its key features, like a mansion setting, door opening screens, emphasis on puzzles and limited resources, multiple endings, and backtracking. Sweet Home was directed by Tokuro Fujiwara, who was also set to serve as the general producer for the remake, with Shinji Mikami as the director. He saw the project as an opportunity to include mechanics that couldn't be implemented in the original game due to technical limitations. However, because Capcom no longer had the rights to the Sweet Home license, the project had to be reworked into an original title while retaining many of its key features. Resident Evil was initially planned to be played in first-person perspective, following the success of Doom from 1993. What you are seeing right now is the only official concept art ever made to illustrate this idea. But because Shinji Mikami was heavily influenced by his experience with Alone in the Dark, he abandoned the first-person concept in favor of the fixed camera perspective. The game and the franchise as a whole almost had a completely different name. In Japan, the series is called Biohazard, reflecting its setting where players face against deadly biological weapons. But since the name was already trademarked in the United States, Capcom had to pick a different title for the Western release, which became
Resident Evil.
There are two significant characters that didn't make the final cut of the game, and their inclusion would dramatically change the game forever if it happened. This is Dewey, a tall African-American man who was going to serve as sort of a comic relief individual and provide lighter moments within the story, probably in the same manner as Sokka from Avatar. And this is Gelzer, a hulking cyborg who will help solve things with his brute strength within the gameplay. I don't think I need to tell you why these boys were scrapped. The designs, at least according to this sketch, speak for themselves. I'm glad Capcom never brought up these concepts ever again. So anyways, that's all I have to say on this topic. I know I skipped a few facts, but I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be. Without further ado, from a remake to a birth of a genre, here's my retrospection on
Resident Evil.
Resident Evil starts out with probably the cheesiest start screen ever made for a game made in the 90s. this won't be the last cheese of the game though. Rushdie will be proud. The story begins with a group of police officers who are on a mission to investigate a series of cannibalistic murders which took place in the Alklay Mountains on the outskirts of Raccoon City. This group consists of 5 troopers who are part of an elite unit called STARS, which stands for Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Here we meet Joseph, Barry, Wesker, Jill, and Chris. These guys are the Alpha Team, and they are currently searching for their missing counterpart, Bravo Team, who disappeared in the middle of their mission. As you can see, this entire opening sequence was made in live action, with real actors and practical effects.
そういう映像をこのゲーム画面上ではできないことをオープニングとかエンディングで見せてちょっと道着も抜きたかったなっていうそういう意図があったんですけど。
And naturally, because this is the 90s and was developed by Japanese developers, the acting is... let's just say it's part of the charm.
No! Don't go!
And just so you know, the live-action cast did not provide the voices of the characters during gameplay. Chris in this opening was played by Charlie Kozlowski, who will return to show support for this franchise and its fans 20 years later, thanks to the Residents of Evil channel.
I got into acting professionally in my mid to late 20s in Tokyo and had quite a bit of success with it, but I think Biohazard Resident Evil was probably the biggest project I got to work on, and I'm very proud of it.
Charlie didn't just play the character for this game, he was also an interpreter to help the communication between the Western actors and the Capcom developers, given the fact that he was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan.
I was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. My family's just been there for a very long time, and I went to the American school there, but I do speak Japanese.
チャーリーが日本語喋れてすごい助かった。そう、他の人は喋れないから、やっぱりチャーリーを軸にして、こっちの意思を伝えるっていう。
Jill here was played by Inez Yushinovsky, who, believe it or not, was a high school student at the time of filming for this game. Unfortunately, because she didn't have much acting experience in her life, Shinji was unhappy with her entire performance and regretted casting her as Jill for this live-action opening. Unlike the rest of the main cast who agreed to make a present public appearance for the fanbase, Inez is the only one who remains absent. I think it's easy to assume that she prefers to just live her life in peace and quiet, which I totally respect. And finally, Barry and Wesker were performed by Greg Smith and Eric Pires, who would also join the cast reunion along with Charlie, provided by the same YouTube channel. Also, shout out to Jason Durkee, who played Joseph. He tried his best here. So during this opening, the STARS team discovers a crashed helicopter. Because the budget was limited, the dev team couldn't afford the helicopter prop for this scene, so the characters are just staring at nothing. They scatter around the field for clues, and eventually, Joseph finds a pistol on the ground, with an amputated hand stuck with it. Then he gets ambushed by a bunch of rabid dogs, who were more than just rabid. The rest of the team fights back against these creatures without a scratch, but unfortunately for Joseph, it was already too late. Brad Vickers, the Alpha Team pilot, decides to cowardly fly away, leaving the team no choice but to run away and take shelter inside this nearby mansion. As if the opening wasn't cheesy enough, the game follows it up with a credit montage that feels straight out of a 90s sitcom.
Chris Redfield. Jill Valentine. Barry Burton. Rebecca Chambers. Albert Wesker. Resident Evil.
Man, do I love the 90s, even though I've been there for only 1 year. Now we move on to the topic that defines the survival horror genre. This is where the similarities to Alone in the Dark start to become clear. By the way, I've already reviewed the Alone in the Dark trilogy on this channel. Please give them a watch if you haven't already. First off, you are given two options of who you want to play as, Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. Jill is the ideal way to play this game if you are new to the genre, thanks to extra inventory slots, a lockpick that gives her access to areas faster, and an exclusive weapon that's effective against a major threat. On the other hand, Chris is the one that provides the actual survival horror experience. He has less inventory space, you are required to find keys to unlock optional areas, and no grenade launcher for him. Besides just the gameplay balance, the thing that the campaigns differentiate from each other the most is the partner who tags along with you throughout the story. In Jill's case, you get assisted by Barry Burton, one of your teammates in the unit. He has a big magnum, he gives you very useful items, he is charismatic, and he delivers the most iconic lines in this entire game.
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
What? What is this? Blood.
Jill, see if you can find any other clues. I'll be examining this. Hope this is not Chris's blood. That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
His lines are so over the top that Capcom couldn't resist making references in the latest games.
Oh my god, are you okay?
Yeah, I was almost a Claire sandwich.
I'm pretty much a master of unlocking.
While Barry is your partner throughout Jill's campaign, Chris becomes friends with the remaining member of the Bravo team, Rebecca Chambers. She is the youngest of this unit, being just 18 years old, and she plays the role of a medic. Unlike Barry, she doesn't give you any weapons or ammo, but she will provide you free healing if you happen to lose health on your way. Also, you get to play as her in some segments if Chris finds himself in serious trouble. That's one thing we are missing about Barry in this game. We don't get to play as him. At all. Not until we finally do 19 years later. With the campaign differences out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay loop. Resident Evil basically adapted almost every key mechanic and concept from Alone in the Dark. The fixed camera angles, tank controls, a mansion setting with a secret underground place, basic gunplay, environmental exploration, inventory management, puzzles, and zombies. Even though they don't look such. Fortunately, unlike its forefather, Resident Evil just does everything better. The movement is less clunky, the gunplay is very optimized, the puzzles do have logical sense to them, there is more enemy variety, the characters have personalities, the mansion feels like a character in itself, and the game has a very rich lore built for it. However, what really amazes me the most besides those things is that the game has mirrors with actual reflections, more so than a lot of games made 2 decades later. Looking at you, Mafia 3. Anyways, Alone in the Dark is a game that I respect more than I enjoy playing. I will recommend this game only for legacy purposes. If you go into it expecting to have the same amount of fun as Resident Evil, you'll be aggressively disappointed. That was the exact reaction I had with Demon's Souls. I said it, and I mean it. Nonetheless, the thing that defines the survival horror genre through this game is that you are extremely vulnerable. The game doesn't hold your hand, and the ammunition plus health items are very scarce. You have to think about who you want to waste your bullets on, and who you want to avoid to make progress. For example, do you think it's worth wasting ammo on this guy? I have enough space in this area, and I can just juke it with no problem. The enemies do not give you any ammo if you kill them. The only main reason to do that is to make your path much easier to navigate. Also, in order to heal your character, you have to eat a green herb or use green spray, which both became the staple of this franchise. Not only that, you can combine the herb with a red one to have full recovery, or a blue herb to get rid of poison. Also, the saving system in this game is very limited. The only way for you to save your progress is to use ink ribbons on those typewriters scattered around the place. If you don't have this with you in your inventory, well, sorry fam, you don't get to save your game. Long story short, You're not a superhero, you're not an army soldier, you are a survivor.
No, he's got a point.
Now let's talk about the most notorious thing about this entire game. The voice acting throughout the whole thing is atrocious.
What is this?
Wow. What a mansion.
It feels like every voice actor for this game recorded one sentence at a time with inconsistent tone, and the developers just didn't time them up properly. Let me give you the worst examples.
Okay, I'll go first. Proceed with your own judgment. All right? Can you do it?
Yes, I can!
Wesker!
Chris, this house is too dangerous. There are terrible demons. Out!
What else is there to say? I guess I can't blame Guinness World Record to reward this game for the worst voice acting in gaming. However, at the same time, this is one of the reasons why Resident Evil remains stuck in your head instantly. Probably for the wrong reasons, but unforgettable nonetheless. So, ciao to Japanifornia. As I mentioned earlier, the voice cast is completely different from the live action one, and shockingly enough, they weren't given any credits at the end of the game. So I guess it's my job to give them some recognition. Chris was voiced by Ramsey Scott, whose voice might be familiar to you because he also played Richter Belmont from Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Tribute? You're a thief. You steal men's souls, their freedom.
It is sad for me to mention that Ramsey had no chance of being heavily recognized by the RE fandom because he passed away from a car accident in Japan in September 2000. Rest in peace. For some reason, I can't find any credit for the voice of Jill within the gameplay, so I'm guessing Inez may have done the voice acting there as well, but I could be wrong. Barry was voiced by, ironically enough, Barry Hurt here. Either the first name is a coincidence, or he is the actual reason why Barry was given that name. Personally, I prefer to think this is how Capcom came up with the name for the character. Wesker's voice performance was done by Pablo Kuntz, who would eventually reprise his voice role as the character for a fan-made RE film created by Residents of Evil, which I'm gonna talk about in a second. And finally, I forgot to mention this earlier, but Rebecca in the live-action cutscenes was done by Linda, who doesn't have her last name shared to the public for some reason, but she did join the RE cast reunion as well. Meanwhile, within the gameplay, Rebecca was voiced by Lynn Harris, who also provided the voice for different characters in the first Tekken games. No matter what you think of the voice acting in this game overall, the cast did their best with what they were given. Still 10 times better than AI.
No, he's got a point.
Let's now talk about the moments that made this game influential at its time compared to its forefather. First off, when Jill and Chris enter this specific hallway, you encounter the very first enemy of the game. Yup, it's a zombie, chewing on the corpse of a Stars Bravo team member, Kenneth. Just the way the zombie turns his head and staring at you menacingly is what makes this scene the most iconic moment of the whole game. It is not a surprise that the zombies in this game were heavily influenced by George Romero's Dead franchise. They also look like zombies this time instead of whatever the hell this is. Fun fact! George Romero was very close to making a Resident Evil movie when this game came out. He made a complete script for it, though not necessarily finalized. But it was immediately rejected by Hollywood, with the rights later given to Paul W.S. Anderson. You might be pissed that it happened, and I was on the same page as well, until I actually learned what the script was about. I didn't read it myself, but I did watch this video by Ink Ribbon, where Kai reads the whole script himself and talked about the most interesting parts of his Resident Evil story. There is also a documentary about how George's film almost came to be, so there's that. Secondly, we have this room in the mansion that contains probably the most iconic file in this entire franchise, the Keeper's Diary. What makes this file so memorable is that based on the last pages, it was written by an actual zombie, clearly evident by the fact that the Keeper wrote the last 2 pages after he killed and chewed on his friend, Scott. So from the very beginning, it has been established that some zombies in the classic era of Resident Evil can retain human consciousness, proven even further by introducing them on screen for the first time in Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, Kendall's daughter and Brad for instance.
Daddy?
Sorry.
This entire document is so memorable and creepy lore-wise that it was actually adapted into a live-action fan-made film produced by the YouTube channel Residents of Evil. I could talk more about the Keeper's Diary, but I think it would be best to save it when I get to review the remake of this game. You know the drill. It sucks though that the Keeper himself just happens to be another generic zombie that hides in the closet and attacks you. No unique character model for him whatsoever. And finally, we have what used to be the scariest moment in existence for its time, the window dog jump scare. I know this moment is nothing in this day and age, but think about the time it was demonstrated to the public. No internet, no social media, and the horror genre was still pretty new for the general audience in the 90s. The dogs were fast, and you had to rely on your limited movement control to survive. So this was a pretty effective jump scare. It is true that Alone in the Dark came up with this idea first, right when you start the game. But it just doesn't hit the same given the fact that you can just kill this creature with your hands. Another thing that makes Resident Evil superior to Alone in the Dark is the enemy variety. I've already talked about the zombies, so let's discuss other enemy types. This diverse range of enemies originated from a disease called the T-virus, and each enemy type has its own name. The dogs in this game are called the Cerberus, and that name came from the three-headed guardian dog of Hades from Greek mythology. Not hard to see why. Some other types you encounter are a bit generic, like snakes, crows, and spiders. Not much else to say. But one rival that stands out the most is the one with the creepiest introduction of the entire game right here. This gorilla-shaped lizard, as described by the Keeper, is called Hunter, and these guys do not fuck around. If you aren't careful enough around them, this happens. You know what they say, don't get ahead of yourself.
Know your fucking place, trash!
The hunters are the real challenge in this game, given that I died to them the most while recording for this video. They are so annoying, but at the same time, they do a great job at creating tension. It is not a secret that another aspect that was much better in Resident Evil than in Alone in the Dark was the boss variety. The Forefather only had a final boss which felt more like a puzzle than something you fight against. But in this game, while it's not really that much, the bosses did serve their purpose overall. Your first boss encounter in Resident Evil is a giant snake called Yawn. If you get bit by it, Jill Chris will get poisoned, and they have to rely on Barry Rebecca to get cured with a serum. You defeat Yawn in this room, but it doesn't die and remains MIA until it comes back for a second round where you finally kill it. I don't know if this counts as a boss fight because you can't kill them yourself with guns, but I'll mention them anyway. When you reach a secret basement, you enter a flooded area, and Capcom couldn't resist making a Jaws reference by throwing an infected shark with two minions, called Neptune. I'm not kidding when I say that I try to kill these guys with my special weapons, but it doesn't seem to work. The only way to defeat all these guys is to drain the water with this one lever. There was no challenge here whatsoever, and your encounter with them is only less than 10 seconds long.
That was easy.
The next boss you approach is a giant ceiling plant called Plant 42. And this is the only boss in the game with different ways of killing it. It has two phases, but they don't really differ that much. Just shoot it shrinks, then shoot it again, and it dies. In Jill's campaign, you can destroy the first phase of the boss without wasting ammo by using a chemical liquid called V-Jolt. You can create it in this specific room, making different combinations of different liquids until you get it, and just throw it to the roots of the plant located in the basement with the shark. After that, you only have to deal with its second phase. But if you choose to not use the V-Jolt on the plant roots, then a cutscene is triggered where Jill gets restrained by one of the tentacles, and Barry Ex Machina joins in to save the day. Why was Barry never considered playable in this game again? Unfortunately for Chris, he doesn't know anything about chemistry, therefore he cannot create the V-Jolt himself. Luckily for him, Rebecca is here to solve the problem, but only if you make a certain decision within the game. We'll talk more about that in a second, because otherwise you'll have to waste a lot of ammo on this plant in both phases. The last boss I wanna mention here is this one. It's just a giant spider, and I think it's the worst one in the game. Not because it's hard to beat or anything. It's just very generic looking, and there's nothing about it that really stands out. Except for some reason, this spider is called Black Tiger, and I couldn't find any relevant sources of why it was named that way. This spider gives me no tiger vibes whatsoever, unless we count these orange stripes on its limbs. So yeah, this is just plain mediocre, and the name makes no sense. Now let's discuss the thing that motivated a lot of players to replay this game over and over again. It's not just killing enemies and managing your resources, it's also the different story outcomes that occur depending on your gameplay actions. Let me explain. In Chris's campaign, you can meet Rebecca in two different locations, either in this safe room where she sprays Chris mistaking him for a threat, or in the room where she is assisting one of her teammates, Richard, who was bitten by Jon. When you meet Rebecca in this safe room, you are given two choices. You can either let her come with you to receive assistance against Plant 42, or tell her to stay in this room, thus getting attacked by a hunter when you come back later on. The same thing applies when you meet her alongside Richard. You are given a task to get the serum from this safe room to cure Richard from the poison. If you come back in time, Rebecca will be playable when Chris is restrained by Plant 42. But if you are too late, she stays in the mansion and she will be attacked by the same hunter in a different room. Speaking of which, letting her stay behind can result in potential death for her character, and it has to do with this creature in two different rooms. When you approach the conflict in both scenarios and choose to leave the room, Rebecca dies off screen. The only way for you to witness her death is to take too long to come to her rescue in this room, and this is how it plays out. When you do end up rescuing her, the scene plays differently depending on the location. If you save her here, they will have this hilarious conversation.
Thank God you're safe.
I'm sorry that you were worried about me.
We are in great danger. We must organize a search for the others and get the hell out of here. Understood?
Yes, sir!
Also, if you reach in time for this staircase conflict, Rebecca will just be in the safe room hiding. But here in this room, she just dips after you kill the hunter. No thank yous or anything. She leaves the room like a coward.
Coward.
Barry is no different when it comes to having different appearances throughout the game. If you pick up the shotgun and fall for this ceiling trap, you will get rescued and have that iconic Jill sandwich meme.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
However, if you never visit this room, you can find Barry hanging around this balcony, discovering the dead body of Forrest, who was torn apart by crows. He'll also give you this grenade launcher. Just like Rebecca, it is also possible for Barry to die in this game. After you kill Jon, Barry gives Jill a rope to go down this hole, the rope breaks, and Barry goes to find another rope to get Jill out of there. Because apparently, Barry has a lot of ropes laying around this mansion. While the game doesn't tell you directly, you do have two choices to make. You either progress through this passage, or you wait for Barry to get you back up with the rope. If you choose the first option, you won't see Barry again until you reach the final level of the game, and it's not gonna end well for him. We'll talk more about that later. If you pick up the other option, you will meet up again when you reach the next level, and you will have another set of options. You can have him stick with you through the place, or go your separate ways. If you split and tell Barry you'll go on your own instead of waiting, you will hear him get into trouble. If you follow his path, he'll just kill this hunter and stick with you like that first option. If you choose to take the other path instead, you will find him laying on the ground bleeding to death. Not only that, he will also reveal some crucial information to us before dying.
I've been cheating you all from the start. If you can forgive me. Be careful of that guy.
And you also get a picture of his family, married and having 2 daughters, Moira and Polly. I really needed to mention this feature because it's actually one of the only things the game does so much better than its remake. But I'll save the further details for the day I get to review this version. Now it's time for me to point out some of the issues that I personally have with the game. First off, the game itself was too easy to play through. Now I never played this game in any of its first platform releases, but based on my experience with it on PS5 and PC through GOG, Resident Evil is a walk in the park. Besides the hunters and some of the design choices, this game didn't have much to offer in terms of challenge. It does make it perfect for newcomers to experience survival horror for the first time, but killing the zombies especially gets a bit old after playing as both Chris and Jill. They have been my bitches right from the start, well, for the most part. It is satisfying to use the shotgun to blow up their heads though.
初心者にとって非常に辛いかなと正直言って。で、慣れてくるに従って難易度でぐーっと下がってくるっていう。
As I mentioned before, you do have this small mission where you have to bring a serum to save this Bravo team member, Richard, from dying of poison. Unfortunately, no matter what you do, no matter how fast you are, Richard dies anyway. Besides some scenario changes and a radio that's barely functional and useful, Richard as a character doesn't provide anything of value except this hilarious acting.
Oh Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
So this is just a waste of time overall. To give you a small heads up if you weren't aware of it, do not get in contact with more than 2 zombies in one place, because then this happens. Finally, my last issue with the game is the underground level. This place is just confusing, slow, boring as hell, filled with copy and pasted wall textures. You deal with hunters that can respawn at times and give you a hard time, a spider boss that's painfully nothing to write home about, and you don't get an item box to take ink ribbons for saving until after you defeat the boss. I can only speak for myself, but fuck this area to death. To end the retrospection on a high note, let me briefly summarize the story for you. But before I do that, let me get this out of the way first. The story in this game, and the franchise as a whole, is not good.
What did you just say?
What really makes this entire IP so special for many of us is the lore building. There is a huge difference between building a lore and telling a story. They were never the same thing to begin with. We don't play these games to witness great storytelling on current events. We are playing them to learn the history of our characters and certain events within this universe. That's why I'll keep the story short here. So the Stars team ends up in this mansion after getting ambushed by dogs. You split up from Wesker, you go around this place solving puzzles, killing zombies, and discovering the fate of your comrades. You then explore a boarding house with mutated sharks and plants, and you have a small reunion with Wesker. It sure as hell doesn't look suspicious at all. Furthermore, you go back to the mansion where you open new rooms that you couldn't open before, you deal with hunters, you open a secret passage that leads to an underground place, and you meet up with another Bravo team officer who happens to be alive, Enrico. He tells Jill Chris that there's a traitor among them, and he gets killed by a mysterious figure. After all these shenanigans, Jill Chris discovered an underground lab where the virus was developed in the first place. Not only that, we eventually learned that the whole mansion was a research facility of Umbrella, the pharmaceutical corporation that was secretly developing bioorganic weapons to sell on the black market. This company also owns 30% of the population of Raccoon City.
You know, this makes me question Chris's lack of awareness in this scene.
Most of these medicines are from Umbrella.
What's Umbrella?
Don't you know? It's a large-scale pharmaceutical company based in Raccoon City.
So he lived in Raccoon City for ages, yet he doesn't know anything about Umbrella? This isn't a sequel-based webcam or anything. Rebecca literally just said the company was based in Raccoon City. If this isn't a plot hole, I don't know what it is.
And what do you know? This PowerPoint projector reveals that the source behind this entire incident was none other than Albert Wesker.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
Imagine anyone surprised about this. Nuts!
So Wesker's entire motive for this mess in the Spencer Mansion was to steal the combat data on the T-Virus and bioweapons and then sell it to Umbrella's corporate rivals. Being the captain of STAR's Alpha team, he baited his own unit into this place infested with bioweapons to generate that data, recorded via Wesker's monitoring systems. I guess we can say he wasn't just a double agent, he was a triple agent, betraying both Umbrella and the STAR's unit.
Wesker doesn't give a damn about anybody but himself.
So Jill Chris meet Wesker in the lower level of the lab, and Wesker intends to demonstrate a final test with them by fighting the ultimate life form.
Tyrant!
Just a giant humanoid creature with a big claw on its left hand, and now you know what T-Virus stands for. Tyrant Virus. This whole scene will play out differently depending on the playable character and the fate of Rebecca or Barry. As Chris, Rebecca tags along with you, and during the conflict, Wesker just shoots Rebecca unconscious because she has a bulletproof vest.
Ha! It seems like this bulletproof jacket is pretty strong.
Then you'll have this very silly moment between Chris and Wesker.
Chris? Stop it.
Wesker, you're pitiful.
No matter what you do as Chris in his campaign, Wesker underestimates the tyrant's behavior and gets stabbed like a fool.
What?
Don't come this way! No!
In Jill's case, Barry double-crosses her because Wesker blackmails him by threatening his entire family. If you didn't wait for Barry to come back with the rope in the mansion, he'll just leave the scene, later found bleeding on the floor before you reach the final boss, and he'll give you the same family photo before dying. If you did wait for Barry at this moment, Barry will knock Wesker out and save Jill. Also, Wesker never gets stabbed by the tyrant in this path, and he'll just disappear.
He's gone.
Either way, regardless of your decisions, the final boss of the game is the tyrant, and... Wait, that's it?
I guess I underestimated Chris at this part.
You can't kill me.
This was before he became the border punching asshole.
So you killed the tyrant in the end, a self-destruct system has been set to blow up the mansion, and depending on your choice right at the start, you can find Chris or Jill locked inside the cell due to not being the main character of the story. The only way to reach that cell is to collect these ammo discs and insert them in those output passcode machines. Or you can actually let one of them die by ignoring all of this, thus affecting the ending overall. There is one thing that I forgot to mention in my flaws topic. Barry and Rebecca are never seen together in one scene. Both of them are completely exclusive to their certain campaigns, which means that there is no ending of this game with all 4 members escaping together.
It is canon that both Barry and Rebecca survived the mansion incident, proven even further with this movie and one certain ending in Resident Evil 3. But the game and its remake never actually showed it, not even this rail shooter spin-off. That should be the main priority for another remake of this game, hands down.
With all that set aside, Gilchrist reached a helipad to send a signal for Brad to land his helicopter. But because things aren't so easy, the tyrant barges through the floor for a second round. And this time he means business, because he can now charge at you for a big swing. Unfortunately for him, he was still my bitch, because after a few bullets, Brad drops a rocket launcher for us, thus occurring this epic final attack. The game ends with the mansion blown to smithereens as every survivor beyond exhaustion rides off into the sunrise.
And that was Resident Evil. Maybe not as fun as some of the later games, but like Sir Francis Drake would say, greatness from small beginnings.
While not being the first game to use its ideas and concepts, Resident Evil is the one that invented the name of the genre. This game taught us what horror truly represents, and unlike the horror movies that we love and hate, you are the one put in the shoes of the protagonist, making choices of how to survive the horror all the way to the end. Despite not holding up as well as the other games in the franchise, it still made a cultural impact and there's a lot of charm to it, especially in terms of the characters and lore. Resident Evil took all the issues from Alone in the Dark and fixed them with a lot of sauce and personality. It is not a secret that Resident Evil is still being used as an inspiration for other horror games to this day, even influencing other iconic horror franchises like Silent Hill, Dead Space, and Fatal Frame to name a few. Resident Evil remains a classic to this day, creating the best subgenre in horror gaming forever.
Personally, this was one of the very last main early games I played in my memory, and I never grew up with it as a kid. However, despite me being a fanboy of its remake, I was surprised to see myself enjoy the original as much as I did. It's not even because I was afraid of tank controls. I thought this game was gonna be much shorter and just less polished, but that was never the case.
If you are curious to see how survival horror was truly born mainstream, do not hesitate giving the very first Resident Evil a chance. It's available on both PS5 and PC through GOG. Just go in with low expectations and you're gonna have the best time as a survival horror fanatic. This game is worth buying at full price.
Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I've been having a lot of fun talking about this game, and just the franchise in general. This is my favorite game franchise of all time, and I cannot wait to play the next game when it comes out. Unfortunately, I won't be able to review RE2 3 before Requiem comes out, but they are still gonna happen this year. And when I get around to play Resident Evil 9, I'll give you my quick thoughts on it once I finish it. Also, please give this channel some support and check out my other retrospective videos I made when you have the time, because I put a lot of effort on these and they deserve a little bit of attention. Hope you guys have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next video. Farewell.